And then your conclusion is probably the most important paragraph of your paper, because this is where you actually bring everything together and synthesize it. So remember what you've done so far. You've explored the issue from both sides. You've compared both sides. You've shown the strengths and weaknesses of both sides. Now we want the answer. What is the compromise to this issue? So you are taking the compromise presented in your introduction and explaining it fully. So if this was my compromise, right? If I was saying that the internet can enhance or distract from learning depending on how it's used, I'm going to explain that in a paragraph and give closure to the argument. So I'm bringing both sides together by explaining my compromise more fully and why I believe that. And I'm going to use my own reasoning and my own ideas to bring that together, also drawing on the things that we've explored so far. So some of the similarities and differences, we can use those to help us understand what the compromise is. So bring it together, explain that compromise fully, and explain in a way that doesn't give one side better or more emphasis than the other. As much as possible, try to make this a middle ground solution so you're pleasing both sides. And again, those sample papers will show you how this can be done. And if you have any confusion on this section after you look at the sample papers, just let me know. But again, remember, it's a compromise and a conclusion. So you're wrapping your paper up, you're bringing it all together, you're giving us your answer. There's no one way to do this, but it needs to be a middle ground solution where you're showing, here are the best aspects of both sides, here's my answer. If you have a hard time figuring out what a compromise should be, I can definitely talk to you about that over Canvas message, email, or in an office visit. But just do your best to bring it together in a way that represents both sides. So if I were doing another example in addition to this one, let's say my argument was about whether or not CBC needs to have more parking spaces on campus. So one side says, no, we can't afford it. The other side says, yes, we need more parking spaces. So the question to ask yourself is, what is a middle ground solution to this? We've got a no and a yes. So a middle ground could be something along the lines of, middle ground could be CBC will add more parking spaces, but they're going to need to increase tuition to make up for the spending cost for the new parking lot. So that way you kind of satisfy both sides. You say, okay, yes, you get your parking spot, but the side that says we don't have enough money, we're going to have to increase tuition in order to meet that. Or we could say, we don't have enough money to do a new parking lot, so we'll just expand the existing parking lots, and that'll be a cheaper solution. Instead of putting in a whole new parking lot, we'll just make them bigger, the ones we already have. So we're trying to cater to both sides here. So that's the idea here for your conclusion. And the sample paper shows, they say after reading on this subject from 2 different articles, here's what we've learned. They go over one side, they review what the other side says, and then they bring it together and complicate the discussion by saying they're both right depending on the circumstance, right? And then we have a nice complicated answer where it's not an easy yes, no. That's the whole point of choosing these issues. They're complicated issues. So show that complexity, and then make sure whatever you say in your conclusion matches the thesis of your introduction. If you can do that, then you'll have a solid synthesis. But it's important to remember to focus on your issue question. Answer the issue question that you started with. So if your question is, does the internet have a negative effect on learning, make sure you answer that question. A lot of times students will answer or change the question in their conclusion, but that's not what we want. We want that original answer. So those are the basic guidelines for the conclusion. Again, I'm available if you have questions, so don't hesitate to reach out to me and let me know how I can help you on these last 2 sections. And then the goal is to have this posted on the discussion board so that you can get feedback. Even if you don't feel like your essay is as finished or as polished as you want it to be, make sure it's posted in time so you can get some feedback. And while you're waiting for feedback, you continue to revise and hone it.